welcome back. It's great to see all of my chefs gathered back in the kitchen. So this week we're talking about dinner. So what can you make for dinner and with what you have in your house? So this is something that I've struggled with doing the online classes, is making sure that whatever recipes I'm providing for you are things that you are likely to have stocked up in your house, because I hate to send anyone out to the store unnecessarily or to have you miss out on a week in the kitchen because you don't have the right ingredients. So that's really challenging for me, and I hope that I've done okay with it. This week we are going, for the dinner recipe, we're going to do a very classic, very old recipe of popovers. So that's the American version, is popovers, but it actually stems from, and this is something that I learned recently, Yorkshire pudding recipe from England many years ago. So it's kind of neat to keep these traditions alive and to storytell through cooking. I find that very fascinating. So when I was learning more about popovers, I found out that during the Civil War, families often made popovers because they kind of expand up and they leave a little bit of an air pocket inside, and so it was a convenient way to stuff food in, and the soldier could carry it out when they were leaving to go to battle. So it was kind of like an early sandwich idea. So today we're going to go with that, and we're going to actually do a 3-course meal based on popovers. How fun is that? So you can pick and choose. You can do all 3, or you can choose one of them and just do that one. So we're going to start with the basic popover recipe, and you can eat just that as it is. Put some butter on it, or maybe some jelly if you want it sweet, and you can have that. Or we're going to do a salad stuffed popover as an appetizer. And then we're going to do a chicken pot popover. So it's like a chicken pot pie, only stuffed in a popover. And then we're going to do a berry dessert popover. So if you just heard that buzzer, that is the oven heating up. So the key to doing popovers is to have a hot oven. So why don't you go ahead and turn your oven on. 425 degrees is the temperature that we want. So you start by doing that, and then we're going to do what we always do, and that is wash our hands, put our hair up if we need to, put an apron on to protect our clothes, and set up our station so that we can get started. And the ingredients are extremely basic for our popover. You're just going to need some flour, some milk, a little bit of butter, a little bit of salt, and a couple eggs. So let's head over to the kitchen, wash up, and get started. Alright, so let's get started. So I have my 4 eggs, and I'm going to go ahead and start cracking those into my mixing bowl. And I've already measured out, I have 2 cups of milk, I have 2 cups of flour. So that's the cool thing about popovers, is that it's a 1-to-1 ratio. So if you're increasing the volume or decreasing the volume, it's always going to be, for every cup of flour there's a cup of milk. Okay, and we're going to have a couple tablespoons of butter, half a teaspoon of salt, and our 4 eggs. Super simple. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to crack my egg. So did you see how I did that? I kind of hit it on the counter, and I'm putting my thumbs in like this and opening it up. And I want to compost these. These are great for compost. So again, I put my fingers in, open it up. And it's good not to do this into anything else. Make sure it's just your eggs in there. So like your mise en place, do it separate. Only because if you get a shell in there, it's a lot easier to take out if you only have eggs in there. If you've already started mixing other things in there, if I already have the flour in and things like that, then it gets really complicated to get that shell out. And even the best of us, with a lot of practice cracking eggs, get shells in there sometimes. It happens. All right, so dealing with eggs is one of those things that after you do that, you want to make sure that you wash your hands again. So if you remember in our kitchen safety lesson in the very beginning, we talked about dealing with meat and eggs and other things that can cross-contaminate. And eggs, it's one of those things, so we want to make sure we wash our hands and anything else that touched it. So I had cracked it on here, so I don't know if you can see there's a little bit of egg on there, so I'm going to wash that too, just to make sure that we're being safe and no one's going to get sick from what we make. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. You do that at the same time and we'll meet back. Perfect. Okay. So we've got our eggs, okay, and now we want to melt 2 tablespoons of butter. So butter comes wrapped like this, which is really convenient because on the wrapping, it is labeled with the measurements for tablespoons. So all you have to do is get a knife, keep it wrapped, and find your 2 tablespoons. So I've got 1, 2 tablespoons, a little line. And I'm going to go ahead and cut down into it and through the paper like that, okay? And now I have my 2 tablespoons. It's so much easier to measure like that, right? I'm going to put it in a microwave safe container and I'm going to melt it. It will probably only take like 20 seconds, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And now we have our 2 cups of flour. So while the butter is melting, I'm going to go ahead and add my ½ a teaspoon of salt into my flour. And I'm going to whisk that, so I have a little whisk. I'm going to whisk that together, make sure it's combined. Sounds like our butter's done. Butter. I'm going to whisk together so nobody gets a big chunk of salt. Make sure our flour and our salt are blended well together. Okay. And now I could use a whisk for my eggs too. Most people do. I actually prefer to use a fork. Not sure why. Personal preference. I'm going to add my butter into my eggs. And I'm going to whisk that up, beat that up really well. So you want to make sure that your eggs are whipped really, really well, because once you add the flour, you're going to do minimal mixing. That keeps the dough tender, doesn't make it tough. Fix that. Okay. So my eggs and butter are blended nicely. And now I'm going to slowly add in the flour, a little bit at a time. And alternate that with our milk. Add a little bit of milk. A little bit more flour. starting to look a little bit more like dough, which is good. I'm going to add the rest of my milk. And I don't have a dairy allergy, so I used real milk and real butter. I am using gluten-free flour, however. But if you have allergies at home, experiment with the type of milk that you're using if you're allergic to milk, and you can always use a vegan butter. An oat milk would probably work really well with this. All right, add the rest of my flour. And if you're doing a sweet recipe with your popovers, so like for the berry one, you can add a little bit of vanilla extract to it, not too much. Just add for a batch this size, you'd want to do maybe at the most a teaspoon of vanilla. And that'll give it a nice sweetness to it. All right, so this is definitely blended. I have my ladle, okay, and I'm going to take, so I have these, which are super convenient. Those of you who have done my classes have seen these a lot. They are greased, and it's important to only fill whatever, maybe you have a popover pan, so there is a specific pan for it, but you just want to fill them halfway, okay, because like the name implies, they're going to pop up, they're going to expand quite a bit. So we want to give them room to do that. So no more than halfway, okay? That one got a little bit too much. I'm going to take some out of that one. And then once these are full, then we're going to go in your preheated oven. If your oven is not quite preheated yet, you're going to want to wait until it is, because that's really important. And you're going to clean up from this. It's going to cook in there for about 40 minutes, so you're going to clean up from this portion of it. And then we'll move on to creating the different variations, okay, so that we have our filling ready. Looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in the oven for 40 minutes, and we'll check back in here in a little bit. I'm going to clean this up, and then we will start making our fillings together. All right? See you back in a few. All right, welcome back. So let's get started on our chicken popovers, okay? While our popovers are still cooking in the oven. So I have assembled, we have our chicken broth. I have some leftover chicken from a dinner that we had, so I'm going to use that, or you can use a rotisserie chicken, whatever you have that's already cooked chicken. So this is a good way to use up leftovers. We have our flour, and so the recipe calls for frozen carrots and peas. And I don't have that, but I have this other frozen vegetable mix. So I'm going to go ahead and use that. You can also use fresh if you have some fresh vegetables and you want to cut that up. You can go ahead and do that. And the Parmesan cheese. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. We need a third cup of flour. Third cup of flour right there. Put that in my mise en place. And we need 1 cup of our frozen vegetables. I got my 1 cup there. I'm not allowed to add a little bit extra, because I really like vegetables. I'll probably do more vegetables than I will chicken. It's more like a vegetable pot pie, which you can feel free to do too. If you don't have the chicken, you can just do vegetables. You can add lentils. Lentils make a great meat substitution. And our chicken. So here's a good sized piece of chicken. Now we're going to want to cut it up into bite-sized pieces. Alright, so first I'm going to cut it into strips, like this. And it also says you can shred it. So whichever you prefer, shredded or chopped up into bite-sized pieces. I find it more manageable to have the small pieces. And again, you're the chef, so you get to make those decisions. And it's already cooked, so you don't have to worry about it being undercooked at all. So it really is just about preference. And Parmesan cheese. So I'm going to go ahead and get my Parmesan cheese. I forgot to get it out, so I'm going to grab that real quick. Alright. And we need 4 tablespoons of that. So 4 tablespoons is actually a 1/4 cup. So I think instead of measuring out 4 separate tablespoons, I think it'll be easier to just do a 1/4 cup. Yep. Mine's going to be a little extra cheesy. Alright, so we have our Parmesan cheese, our chicken, our vegetables, our flour, our broth, and here's a little mise en place for salt and pepper, but I think I'm going to add that afterwards to taste, just a little sprinkle of salt and pepper. So I'm going to hold off on that. Alright, so I have my pan, my saucepan, and what we're going to want to do is whisk in, we're going to put our broth into this pan. And we're going to whisk in our flour, okay? And we're going to just put it on medium heat to heat it, and what happens is the flour is going to thicken the broth and make it more like a gravy, okay? So I'm going to put this on medium, and I'm going to add my flour and whisk it in. Let me bring you closer so you can watch. Alright, so our stove is on, broth is in there. I'm adding in my flour. And sometimes, if you don't whisk it properly, this is where you get it all lumpy and chunky. So this will probably take about 4 or 5 minutes. And just keep whisking it so that we don't get lumps. Okay, it's starting to simmer now. It's starting to boil. So it's going to thicken really quickly. And we want to make sure that we're continuing to whisk it. Matter of fact, I think we're just about there. See how it's thick enough it coats the whisk. So I'm going to turn it down now because it's going to start to get real thick real fast. All right. And while I'm still stirring it, so I have it on low, I'm still stirring it, and it wants me to put in half of the Parmesan cheese. So it doesn't have to be exact, we just want to save some to put on the top afterwards. So I put in about half of my cheese. And that's going to melt. I'm going to add my frozen vegetables in. Okay. See how thick it's getting now? Wow, it's really like a gravy, huh? And I have my salt and pepper. I'm going to add that in. And I'm going to add my chicken. So once we have that all mixed in, okay, I'm going to make sure that my pan is set to the lowest temperature I can have it at. And I'm going to let that finish cooking until our popovers are ready. Okay. And remember, do not open the oven for your popovers, okay, throughout this, because that'll cause them to deflate and they won't rise properly. So if you want to peek in there, just turn the oven light on and look in, but don't open the oven, okay, no matter what. All right, so we can actually start making our dessert popovers. All right, so why don't we clean up from doing our chicken, and then I will meet you back to do our berries. All right, see you soon. All right, so let's get started on our dessert version of the popovers. So we need our berries, our sugar. We needed 2 tablespoons of sugar, which I went ahead, this is granulated sugar, I measured that out. A tablespoon of powdered confectionery sugar. This is optional, it's just for putting on the top to make it pretty afterwards, so I have that. We need 1 cup of berries. So I have some, it called for frozen berries, but I have some strawberries that I need to use up. So I'm going to go ahead and use some of those, and then I will also add some frozen blueberries because I have those as well. And I'm going to cut them a little bit. It's going to make a sauce, so it doesn't have to be too small. Oh, I need to measure this. We need 1 cup. And so I'm adding the strawberries first because they're bigger. And just like life, you add the big stuff in first and the little stuff can kind of fill in the gaps in between. And the blueberries are a lot smaller. So. I have actually almost an entire full cup of the strawberries, but I'm going to add the blueberries as well. Runaway my blueberries. All right. So I have a little bit more than 1 cup. That's fine. Add those in. Okay, so I have my 1 cup of berries. And it calls for a 1/2 cup of water. So we're going to put a 1/2 cup of water and our sugar in the pan to make the sweet sauce for it, okay? So I'm going to grab some water, put that in the pan, and I'll pull you closer so you can watch what I'm doing in the pan, okay? Okay, so I've added my 1 cup of berries, my 2 tablespoons of sugar, and my 1/2 cup of water into the saucepan. I'm going to go ahead and turn it on. Medium heat, okay? And then I'm just going to let that cook down and thicken and simmer. Okay, it's going to soften and it'll be really nice. I will probably mash mine a little bit to make it more of a sauce-like consistency. Oh, our popovers are done. So this is just going to sit while we take the popovers out of the oven, and it's going to cook down into a sauce. All right, let's check on our popovers. Okay, so here are our popovers, my popovers. Unfortunately, they didn't really pop the way they're supposed to, and I'm not sure if that's because of the gluten-free flour. Again, those of you who have done my classes know that I like to try things in real time with you guys so that we can all learn together. It's a learning experience. So I've never made popovers, so I'm gonna have to play around with it and find out why mine didn't pop the way they should have. Maybe my oven isn't the right temperature. I'm gonna have to check on that, or maybe the gluten-free flour just doesn't allow it to pop the way that regular flour does. So give me your feedback and tell me, when you make this, what happened to yours? If you used regular flour, did it work? So maybe that'll help me narrow down why mine didn't pop over as much. But I'm gonna go ahead and let them cool a little bit, and I'm gonna try it and see how they taste, because I bet they're still gonna taste delicious. All right, so when our sauces are all done, we're ready to assemble, we'll go ahead and do that, but the popovers have to cool for a few minutes. All right. Okay, so let's start with our chicken popovers. So as I'm taking this out, you can see where it did pop a little bit, but not the way it should have. And this one did a little bit as well. So I'm going to go ahead and crack it open a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and put the chicken inside of our popover. So it's kind of spilling out like that. Now normally these should be really airy, and it should have a pocket in there that holds it very nicely. That's not the way that mine came out, so we're going to make do like this. And then we had our extra Parmesan cheese, so I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle that on. And there we go, our chicken pot popovers. And in a minute, we should be ready to assemble our berry one, because we still have to mash that. I don't know if you can hear it simmering over there. It's not quite ready yet. All right, enjoy. Okay, so our berries look like they're ready to get mashed. Delicious. You can leave them whole if you prefer. I like mine to be more of a sauce. All right, and that should be nice and thick and gooey. Oh, it smells wonderful. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and assemble our dessert. Okay, so this one smells fantastic. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing. I'm gonna open up my popover. And I'm going to add our berry sauce to it. And I'm going to sprinkle some of the confectionery sugar on the top of it. So remember, your presentation matters. All right, so this looks delicious. Some of my junior chefs have even done things like, you know, maybe they'll take it and they'll swirl it on a plate. You know, you can do something fancy like that. Feel free to get as creative as you want. And again, remember, send me pictures. I want to see how yours came out and help me get to the bottom of what went wrong with mine, why mine didn't pop up. I want to figure that out, so help me do that, all right? So I will see you next week, and we will be talking about some more historical recipes, but we're going to be doing it for exclusively desserts. All right, so I'll talk to you next week.